Currently, the Gambia is in a severe debt distress as the government finds herself borrowing more money than ever before, leading to a dramatic surge of the debt to GDP ratio by 30% from 2016 to 2021. According to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the Gambia's debt to GDP ratio skyrocketed from 56.7% in 2017 to an alarming 120.3% in 2020. Reflecting Adama Barrow's heavy reliance on debt financing. But who is to be blamed for the Gambia's higher debt distress? Who is the ignorant president that plunged this tiny West African nation into a choking debt crisis? Let's find out together. Make sure you stay till the end as we will reveal something shocking regarding the Gambia's nearly irreversible debt crisis. If this doesn't shock you, then nothing ever will. Currently, the Gambia's national debt is $1.7 billion according to the IMF. This equates to $136 billion. Surprisingly, over 70% of the Gambia's external debt is owed to multilateral institutions such as the World Bank and the African Development Bank, illustrating a heavy reliance on international financial organizations, as noted by the World Bank. Despite traditional lenders like multilateral institutions, China has emerged as a significant creditor to the Gambia, with Chinese loans constituting nearly 20% of the country's total external debt, as of 2022, as reported by the Gambia Ministry of Finance. The Gambia's debt sustainability metrics indicate a precarious situation, with the debt service to revenue ratio standing at a concerning 50% in 2023. Raising red flags regarding the country's ability to manage its debt burden effectively, according to the African Development Bank Group. But who is responsible for all these mess the Gambia finds herself in? Rapidly submerging into external debt. Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara, Yahya Jammeh or Adama Barrow. Yes, all of them are to be blamed 100%, but there is one individual who should be blamed twice as much. Who is it going to be? Well, let's start from Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara. Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara, the first president of the Gambia after gaining independence from Britain in 1965, governed the nation for over 3 decades until a coup d'etat ousted him in 1994. His regime, characterized by stability and relative prosperity, initially brought hope and promise to the Gambian people. Jawara's leadership was marked by a commitment to democracy and non-alignment in foreign policy. He advocated for a mixed economy, combining elements of socialism and capitalism, and pursued policies aimed at promoting agricultural development and education. Economically, Jawara's regime sought to modernize the Gambia's infrastructure and diversify its economy. However, this vision came with financial implications. The regime borrowed substantial amounts of money to finance development projects, including infrastructure, agriculture, and education initiatives. Reports have shown that the Jawara government has borrowed $300 to $350 million during his tenure. The borrowing was often necessary to fund ambitious development projects aimed at improving the country's socio-economic conditions. However, it also led to a significant debt burden that would eventually become a challenge for subsequent administrations to manage, like we are witnessing today. Despite the economic challenges, Jawara's regime managed to maintain a degree of stability and fostered a sense of national unity among the diverse ethnic groups in the Gambia. However, criticisms of his administration grew over time, particularly regarding issues of corruption, nepotism, and economic mismanagement. The eventual downfall of Jawara's regime came in 1994 when it was overthrown in a bloodless coup led by Sana Sabali together with Edward Singhate, and not Yahya Jammeh as people were made to believe. The coup brought an end to decades of democratic rule and ushered in a period of authoritarianism under Jammeh's regime. In retrospect, Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara's regime left a mixed legacy in the Gambia. While it brought stability and some economic development to the country, it also faced criticism for its shortcomings and the burden of debt it left behind. Moving on from 1994, when Yahya Jammeh's reign began. Yahya Jammeh's government in the Gambia was marked by a complex interplay of authoritarian rule, political repression, and economic mismanagement. Initially hailed as a reformer, promising to root out corruption and bring prosperity to the Gambia, Jammeh's regime soon descended into a pattern of human rights abuses, political oppression, and economic stagnation. During his over 2-decade-long rule, Jammeh consolidated power through a combination of military support, political manipulation, and control over key institutions. His government was characterized by a pervasive culture of fear and intimidation, with opposition figures, journalists, and activists routinely subjected to harassment, arbitrary arrest, and even extrajudicial killings. Freedom of speech and assembly were severely restricted, and dissent was met with swift and severe reprisals. Jammeh's regime also faced widespread allegations of corruption and embezzlement, with the ruling elite accused of siphoning off public funds for personal gain, while much of the population languished in poverty. He was estimated to have siphoned approximately $350 million during his 22 years in power. Despite the Gambia's potential for agricultural development and tourism, the economy stagnated under Jammeh's mismanagement, with high unemployment, inflation, and a widening gap between the wealthy elite and the majority of the population. Internationally, Jammeh's government became increasingly isolated due to its poor human rights record and disregard for democratic norms. The European Union and other donors suspended aid to the Gambia, further exacerbating the country's economic woes. Jammeh's erratic behavior and controversial statements, including claims of being able to cure AIDS and infertility with herbal remedies, further undermined his credibility on the world stage. Despite facing mounting pressure both domestically and internationally, Jammeh managed to cling to power through a combination of repression and manipulation of the electoral process. However, his authoritarian rule eventually came to an end in January 2017 when he was defeated in a presidential election by Adama Barrow, a relatively unknown opposition figure. Initially refusing to accept the results, Jammeh was eventually forced into exile following mediation by regional powers and the threat of military intervention. In summary, Yahya Jammeh's government in the Gambia was characterized by authoritarianism, political repression, economic mismanagement, and international isolation. While he initially promised reform and prosperity, his regime ultimately brought hardship and suffering to the Gambian people, and his eventual ousting marked a hopeful turning point towards democracy and greater respect for human rights in the country. Adama Barrow's government in the Gambia marked a significant departure from the authoritarian rule of Yahya Jammeh, ushering in a period of democratic transition, political openness, and economic reform. Barrow, a former real estate agent and political newcomer, came to power in January 2017 after winning a historic presidential election that ended Jammeh's over two-decade-long rule. Barrow's administration inherited a country reeling from years of political repression, economic stagnation, and international isolation. His government faced the daunting task of rebuilding democratic institutions, restoring the rule of law, and revitalizing the economy, while also addressing the deep-seated social and political divisions exacerbated by Jammeh's regime. One of the first priorities of Barrow's government was to reverse the culture of fear and repression that had characterized Jammeh's rule. Barrow initiated a series of democratic reforms aimed at strengthening civil liberties, promoting freedom of expression, and fostering political pluralism. His administration released political prisoners, lifted restrictions on the media, and allowed opposition parties to operate freely, signaling a commitment to democratic governance and respect for human rights. This was a job well done at first sight. However, things took the wrong turn economically, as the economy had stagnated and eventually started to show signs of economic mismanagement and failure up to 2024. Currently, it is going to be very hard and nearly impossible for Adama Barrow to revive the Gambian economy, as he is considered to be an illiterate and uneducated, making him unfit for the Herculean task. Because of this, Adama Barrow has turned into a liability for the nation without having anything to offer the Gambian people, if not the massive debt crisis he has plunged the Gambia into. Now let's get into the exact figures. But before we get there, this is a humble request to please support our work by liking this video and subscribing to the African Pacific YouTube channel, a Gambian-owned channel looking at both the good and the bad happenings in the Gambia that are often ignored by mainstream media. Please show your support by liking and subscribing. Thanks you so much. Now let's dive right into the facts, figures, and statistics. After this, it will become clear who is that president that plunged the Gambia into the never-ending vicious cycle of continuous borrowing. Let's go. Since Jawara became the president in the Gambia from 1965 to the 1994 coup that ousted him, he had borrowed approximately $300 to $350 million, which equates about 24 to 28 billion dalasis within his 32 years tenure. This debt burden created by the First Republic wasn't cleared and was passed on to the regime of Yahya Jammeh, who also borrowed excessively, with approximately close to $700 million being borrowed during his 22 years governance of the Gambia. This equates to about 48 to 50 billion dollars. Coming on to Adama Barrow's regime, borrowing never stopped as with previous regimes. Shockingly, reports from the World Bank have shown that Adama Barrow have taken much more debt in a very short time frame compared to others before him. From 2017 to 2024, Adama Barrow has borrowed a shocking amount of money in just 8 years. The amount will shock you, as it shocked many financial experts around the globe. Do you want to take a guess? Well, before we reveal this highly worrying figure that will simply blow your mind, please, we are humbly requesting you to like this video and subscribe to the African Pacific YouTube channel. Please appreciate our tremendously research and hard work by subscribing. Thank you so much. Now back to the exact figure borrowed by President Adama Barrow. It is a staggering $700 million according to the World Bank in just 8 years from 2017 to 2024. Clearly he has borrowed more and in a much shorter time frame than his predecessors. In this manner, plunging the Gambia into debt crisis and the never-ending cycle of borrowing. To put this simply, in just 8 years, President Adama Barrow has borrowed about 3/4 or nearly 75% of what both Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara and Yahya Jammeh put together have borrowed in 51 years. Question? If Adama Barrow has borrowed 75% in 8 years of what both Yahya Jammeh and Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara have borrowed in 51 years, how much is he going to borrow if he is to spend 51 years in power? Well, based on our own estimations, this is not a figure given by financial organizations. It is solely based on our estimation. Adama Barrow will borrow more than $4.5 billion based on his current borrowing trend from 2017 to 2024. This is what African Pacific has estimated. This is equivalent to $360 billion. This is what Adama Barrow is expected to borrow if he should be in power for 51 years, which is the tenure of both Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara and Yahya Jammeh. Adama Barrow is borrowing left, right, and center in a much larger scale than ever before without realizing the damning consequences. Where is all this money going? Well, according to the World Bank, 85% of funds borrowed are earmarked specifically for infrastructural liabilities. Adama Barrow failed to realize the choking consequences of excessive borrowing only to immerse these funds into massive liabilities. Yes, infrastructural projects such as roads, bridges, or even healthcare are important. However, he needs to know that these are massive liabilities, so therefore they can't be funding these ventures with funds borrowed because it will have to be paid back. As Adama Barrow immerses these funds into liabilities, where is the Gambia going to get the money to pay back the loans, since the funds have been put towards liabilities, which means we are not expecting any return on investment, as the loans were not invested into assets. This is the reason why Adama Barrow is finding himself borrowing excessively, plunging the country into more critical debt crisis. To add more fuel to the fire, Adama Barrow has opted for constant tax increments, increasing taxes all the time. In their minds, they believe that this will help the government collect more revenue, but little do they know that this will only hurt the economy, and a continuous depreciation of the Gambian dalasi. This is a humble reminder to please like this video and subscribe to the African Pacific YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Jarama Yen Yep. To put things simply, the more taxes Adama Barrow imposes on Gambians, it will lead to the weakening of the economy because more taxes will make people want to spend less, which means less money in circulation for local businesses, ultimately forcing them to close down. More businesses closing down will mean tax reduction for the government because businesses forced to close down by unfavorable economic situations won't pay revenue to the government in the form of tax. This means less money for the government to collect. On a consumer level, higher government taxes mean inflation, which also means two things: more poverty and desperation because people will not be able to afford basic things. So you see, it only makes much more sense not to keep increasing taxes just because you have the power to do so without realizing the dire consequences. As a sound-minded president, you just don't increase taxes anytime you want. These things don't work that way. This can only be the work of an ignorant individual who just doesn't know his limits, and he has to be stopped if not. By the time he leaves office, the economic damage will be beyond repair. In this manner, we will lose our tiny country, the smiling coast of Africa. Comment down below on who you think has plunged the Gambia into the severe debt crisis we are currently facing. Ramadan Mubarak.